One of the most common phrases you will hear when you're working in social care is, "He doesn't do that when I'm on shift." Is it because he doesn't do it when you're on shift? Because you are a wonderful member of staff and we need to learn from you so that we can develop a relationship that you have with him? Or does he not do it when you're on shift because you're a little bit controlling and he actually conforms to what you want because he's not actually that comfortable with you? When you ask someone to do something, when you put a demand onto someone, a request, essentially they have three options. They can say yes, they can say no, or there is the option that we don't talk about enough. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why when someone complies, it isn't actually always what we want. It isn't actually always what the person is comfortable with. Let's say you've been asked to take Johnny for a walk. You turn around to Johnny and you go, "Johnny, let's go for a walk." He can conform, he can put his shoes on, he can go for a walk, and he can enjoy himself. That is one of the options that he has, and that is one of the things that can happen. Or you turn around and go, "Johnny, let's go for a walk," and he refuses. And he might do that in quite a graphic way, but he essentially refuses. The third option, which we don't talk about enough, is that you might go, "Hi Johnny, let's go for a walk," but he doesn't really want to. And he puts his shoes on because he's conforming to what you want to do. You have pressure above you saying he has to do a certain number of activities every week. And so you've been told to take him for a walk. But he's seething, he's starting to get upset because in that moment he's conforming to what you want, but inside he's becoming distressed with this process. And so you walk around the woods for an hour. You get to tick in your box that he's done the activity. But when you get back to the unit and you start to work with somebody else, he ends up in a situation where he knocks over a chair and everybody says it happened for no apparent reason. If we tie all this back, the reason might be he didn't want to go for a walk, but we weren't able to see that. We weren't able to understand that. This is him essentially countering against the control of you asking him to do something. Counter control is a real thing we need to be very aware of. So counter control can be considered as the fact that someone is actually conforming and being pliant because they don't feel comfortable not to be. They feel they should conform to what you want. The problem with this is actually building tension within the person. And as it's building tension and stress within the person, they move into a triggering zone. And just like you, their tolerance decreases because of the amount of stress they're now putting into their system. When their tolerance starts to decrease, the smallest thing can actually trigger that incident. And most of us will turn around and look at an incident and go, that happened because this particular thing occurred. But because of things like slow triggers, we know that that stress level may have built over a period of time. Are you an employer or a registered manager working in care? You have incident after incident. You have staff leaving every week. This video is for you. My name is Des Cook. I'm a behaviour analyst and a trainer, and I've taught tens of thousands of staff to build genuine relationships with the most complex people in our industry. What we have for you is a system that works in any service, addressing staff turnover and helping with those poor relationships that people have that lead to incidents. We do this by assisting staff to understand about their own emotional resilience, to understand about use of behavioral language and why that is so important, to understand about data collection and its importance, assist them to understand how they, as staff, can help each other emotionally. If you've noticed that the staff and supported individual relationships are under a bit of pressure and you're having incidents on a regular basis and that isn't changing and you're on the same repetitive cycle, click the link below. This sort of thing happens to you too. Imagine you wake up in the morning, you're late for work because you slept through your alarm clock. And when you're late for work, you go down to put the kettle on and the electricity's off. You can't even have a hot cup of coffee. So you've missed your caffeine, you're late for work, and you get yourself out the door as quick as you can. And as you get out the door, you open the door and you find you've got a flat tire. At that point, your stress level is definitely starting to rise. So you get yourself to work, and when you get yourself to work, you walk into work, you've got the story in your head, you've got all this stress happening to you, and this person walks up to you and goes, "You were meant to be ordering the resources. We don't have the resources to do this activity today." And at that point, you become quite defensive and you become quite stressed and you express yourself in a manner which would probably be considered inappropriate. It's not to do with the fact that you didn't order the resources. It's to do with all the things that happened to you earlier in the day that has built your stress so that you're less tolerant when you're in the triggering zone and you're actually less able to deal with those sorts of events. This links back to what has happened with Johnny. Johnny has had things happen he doesn't particularly want to happen. His stress level has risen. His ability to tolerate changes in his environment has decreased. He becomes less tolerant. He needs certainty in his life. As soon as there's any uncertainty, he actually gets to the point whereby he has that incident we discussed earlier. As an aside, we tend to hurt the people we care about the most. We share our stress with the people we care about the most. We don't share our stress with strangers. Take an example. You're coming into your home at the end of the day, put your key in the door, and next door neighbour's dog is leaving a nice present on your lawn. And as next door neighbour's dog is leaving a present on your lawn, you catch the neighbour's eye and you say, "Mate, hi." You even, whenever he acknowledges the present, you even turn around to the neighbour and say, "Thank you." But when you come through the door and you get to your partner, that person you trust, you will be ranting about the next door neighbour to your partner, and they end up taking all your stress. We share our stress with people we trust. And if we think about Johnny, Johnny may not share his stress with you. He may conform to you, but may release his stress on a completely different member of staff. And in our industry, we have a lot of people saying, but he must hate you, he hits you. And if a manager turns around and goes, "Oh, he doesn't like you because he's hitting you," they may be missing the point that you are the only person he has a solid enough relationship with to express his stress to. You'll all probably have come across a child who's an absolute angel at school and an absolute nightmare at home. That can happen the other way too, but that's a more common way that it actually occurs. And what you have there is you have a child who is conforming to rules and regulations and timetables, and they're conforming to the fact they've got to get through maths before they can go out and play in the playground. And that is adding stress to the person's day. When the child comes home, the child then has a situation where everybody's going, "Oh, how was your day? What did you do?" And adding more interaction and more stress. And quite often, the child will conform during the day and then release all that pressure and stress onto somebody they trust. We need to understand that because the person is upset with you and showing there and displaying they're upset with you, some of the time, that might be because you are the one emotionally available, stable adult who is consistent in their life. And that is a really important, awesome responsibility. For example, do you have anybody who maybe is much harder to work with on a Monday? The point here is, if you are the emotionally available, stable adult in that person's life, and at the weekend their life is chaotic, it's difficult for them to predict how their weekend's going to be because the family's chaotic, they take all that stress that might happen over their weekend and they come to school, for example, on a Monday, and you are the emotionally available, stable adult in their life, and they can share that with you, which can look like a very inappropriate behavior, but it may be that that's an important relationship in their lives. This is a really difficult thing to work with because we're working with relationships. We're working with human beings. Consistency is really hard to create because everybody has different relationships, and we can do a lot of work with that, but we need to understand that we're working with human beings. In care, one of the things that happens is that an incident will happen, and we take data on what happened around that incident. And that's good to do, and we can actually learn a lot from that. However, we need to take into account the bigger picture. We need to take into account the slow triggers. We need to take into account the setting factors which may have happened much earlier in the day. The whole point about this is Your job is to take the data so that we can work out the bigger picture. Because when you're actually in the incident and you get that scream and your heart rate goes up, you will make assumptions. And when you make assumptions, that can make the whole thing go pear-shaped. We need to take data on what's happened just now, but also what's happened throughout his day and beyond that could lead us into a situation where we can learn from this and help him in his future. Things we can think about from this are that we should stop celebrating compliance if it doesn't feel genuine. And if we're taking good data, we might actually have noticed that Johnny doesn't really want to go for a walk because every afternoon he's had an incident, he's had a walk in the morning. Those sorts of patterns start to come out if the data collection is done well. So when people tend to say it happened for no apparent reason, they're limited in what they're looking at. One of the things we need to be generating when we're working at all levels of our work is we need to be generating psychological safety. In other words, the people need to feel safe to be able to say no. People need to feel able to say yes or no, as opposed to thinking they should conform to make a staff member feel like they're doing the right thing for the staff member. We need to be quite wary of some of the coercive practices that happen in the name of following a plan, for example. Summing all of that up, the point here is if you understand a little bit about counter control, you will actually end up reducing some of those incidents and increasing the relationships that you have. And those relationships will be built on trust, not on control. And that has magnificent outcomes for everybody concerned.